I've got some. I mean, I've heard some interesting information about UFOs now and extra-dimensional beings and like diplomatic relationships between extraterrestrial nations and the United States and the Chinese government and the Russians. I mean, it's really blowing up, this stuff. When we spoke to Jeremy Corbell, he says they don't want these leaks, even if they are trying to use it as a distraction. They're pissed off that these leaks are being made. So let us know in the chat. Now, but what do we know, really, when it comes to these revelations? We are not Ross Coulthart, the best-selling author of In Plain Sight, exploring the mystery of unidentified flying objects, and the Newsmax journalist who conducted... This is just to wet your whistle. This is just to get your gander up, because we're very excited to have Ross Coulthart here, because we think he's part Jim Robinson, Neighbours star, if you're not familiar with Australian TV. Alan Dale, yes, I think, was the actor. And part... Andrew Marr, who's a British investigative journalist. So he's got like wonderful visual credentials. But look at how he's handling David Grush, and look at how sort of intimate he is. I'm going to interview him the way he interviewed Grush. Have a look at this.
Have human beings been hurt or killed by a non-human intelligence?
While I can't get into the specifics because that would reveal certain U.S. classified operations, I was briefed by a few individuals on the program that there were malevolent events like that.
No, I'm scared. People have just heard you say non-humans may well have murdered human beings.
That seems to be the case at one point, yeah.
Ross, are you, through your rhetorical style, through your cadence, through your leaning in, dramatising this subject? Please welcome Ross Coulthart to the show. Hello, Ross.
G'day, Russell. How are you, mate? I don't think it needs any dramatisation. It's real. The phenomenon is real. What Dave Grush is saying is real. And the mainstream media, you are a rare exception. Thank God somebody like you is doing a show, because we are being ignored. There is an attempt to cover this up, bury it back in a box for another 80 years. And the simple fact is David Grush is telling the truth, backed by other whistleblowers who are ready to come forward. This is going to come out.
Even the astonishing and captivating revelations contained within your interview are just the tip, and I mean just the tip, Ross, of the iceberg. And by God, it's a hell of an iceberg, because I can tell, Ross, I can see the way that you're conducting that interview. You know a great deal more than you're able to publicly say. Now, I've heard off the record, and I won't name my sources because I'm a professional journalist, one of the best, some say, I've heard recently that there are diplomatic relationships between the US government and extraterrestrial nations. There are diplomatic and that have gone all the way back to Roswell, that Roswell was real, that they have live extraterrestrials, that there are different extraterrestrial nations that the governments of the world have been in touch with for 50, 60 years, that this is the mind-blowing, epochal, paradigm-shifting story the world's been waiting for. Now, you've written about this subject, Ross. So you've got to know a lot more than you're letting on. What revelations, I'm scared as well, Ross, what revelations are you prepared to give us here?
Okay, well, I mean, the simple fact is, what you just detailed there, Russell, is what David Grush alleged to me in the News Nation interview. The simple fact is that there is a Defence Office pre-publication security review approval for Dave Grush's interview, a DOD-approved document where Dave Grush set out what he wanted to talk about. And in that document, he talked about non-human intelligences engaging with this planet, about agreements implicitly between those NHIs and the human race, about crash retrievals, recoveries, reverse engineering programs. Now, the simple fact of that so-called DOPSA document, the fact that there's a Defence Department approval, doesn't mean the DOD saying what Grush is saying is true. But I know that what Grush is saying has verification from multiple other sources. People like me, I'm a professional journalist, I'm an old-fashioned journo who goes out and develops sources and builds up networks of people who help me with information. When I was writing my book, In Plain Sight, I started to get calls from people who were giving me information from within the legacy crash retrieval program. And I can't say definitively I know it's true because I haven't yet seen these craft. I haven't seen the secret documents that David Grush has seen. But what he's done, what this incredibly brave man has done, is he's come forward not only to the Inspector General of the Defence Department and the Inspector General of the intelligence community, he's also testified under oath to the Congress, to the two oversight committees, the House Intelligence Committee and the Senate Intelligence Committee. If he's lying, send him to jail. Prove it and send him to jail. If he's not lying, then that's the test. I know he's not lying. I know he's telling the truth. And what really gives me it pisses me off, Russell, because I'm a journo who has spent much of my life in mainstream media, and I'm seeing newspapers like the New York Times, the Washington Post, the London Times, all of these papers are suppressing this story, not because they're being told to by the intelligence community, because they don't have the capacity anymore for critical thinking like you do and like so many other shows that are starting to develop online do. The simple fact is mainstream media is failing to cover this issue. And I've never in my long career as a journalist been so shocked and confronted by the fact that what we're looking at here is we're seeing unfold at the moment the biggest story in human history. This is the story of non-human intelligences engaging with this planet. And I've heard this from US intelligence officials, Defense Department officials, scientists who have literally touched the side of these craft. It's real, as best as I can tell. And a man like Grush deserves to be embraced by your audience and supported. And I really applaud you for doing what you're doing and having the independence of thought and the critical thinking to engage with this subject.
Ross, that's so fantastic. You really raised the temperature. You're obviously a credible journalist yourself, not prone to hysteria, even if you do sometimes lean in dramatically to your subjects. You've raised the temperature so much, I've undone another button on my shirt to celebrate. Now, one of the revelations that I'd like us to discuss, and this is an opportunity for us to use our unique platform here on Rumble, particularly on Locals. And if you're watching us on Rumble, join us on Locals now. Press that red button on your screen. Why don't you collectively use Google Earth? Why don't we use Alphabet's Utilities for Good? If you have a look at Area 51 now in Nevada, you'll see a mountain in that region which many claim has visible entrances and exits that are currently being used by these UFOs, by these NIHs. I'm not sure what acronym to use anymore, but we can do this research right now ourselves. You lot in the chat, have a look, and our production company, Bad Graphics Jack, could have a little poke around. I mean, it seems to me that in some cases it's almost ludicrously ordinary that these interactions have been going on for a long time. There are sort of bureaucratic, diplomatic agreements. There have been conversations. There have been trade agreements almost. There are the rights to access certain territories, legitimized exchanges of human life, stuff that the mainstream media will understandably, to a degree, Ross, treat as ludicrous because given the conditioning we've received up to now, it seems implausible to discuss it until you increase the size of your frame to include the evident reality that the cosmos is without limitation, both temporally and spatially, and within that framing, a more advanced species, whether that's extraterrestrial or interdimensional, is a literal inevitability, and the likelihood of exchanges increases exponentially on that basis. And then the idea that, oh, why haven't they landed on the White House lawn? Well, it seems like every time that there is credible evidence, it's suppressed, it's undermined, it's reframed, it's rephrased, whether it's footage. Oh, look, we're looking for that mountainscape now. There's really good footage of that. So do you think that, in a sense, Ross, that what this challenges us to do as both recipients and creators of media is to responsibly broaden out our framing?
Absolutely. I mean, just to give you an example of just how absurd this is, that this story is being overlooked, Russell, you're and my mate Jeremy Cordell with his colleague George Knapp broke a story in the last 12 hours about a document that I've known about for some months. And in that document, a Canadian MP, a member of Parliament in Canada called Larry Maguire, writes to the Canadian Defence Minister and reveals that he has investigated and discovered a secret Canadian collaboration with the US on UAP crash retrievals. The Canadians have been allegedly working on non-human technology in collaboration with the US government. And it's really interesting, at the moment, my government in Australia is about to spend $400 billion on nuclear attack submarines from the United States. I think it's an important political and economic issue as a journalist that our government, at a time when it's being encouraged to spend $400 billion, is part of a secret Five Eyes agreement called the Foreign Material Exploitation Program, where they are literally recovering, according to this letter from this Canadian MP, craft from another world and involved in attempts to back engineer and reverse engineer that. And frankly, I appreciate that for a lot of people in this forum here hearing this, they might think, well, Christ, that sounds crazy. That sounds impossible. What a load of bollocks. The truth is, the ontological shock of that shouldn't deter them from pushing for this to be investigated. Because what the White House, what the Pentagon, what the intelligence community is relying on is your audience, not, as Jeremy says, weaponizing their curiosity. They need to indulge their curiosity and start asking questions. It's like, it's funny actually listening to your show. I hear so often things that make me wonder as a journalist, has society lost its capacity for critical thinking? Just because a bunch of experts or pompous twats in Washington say something, why should we necessarily believe it? We should test it. We should always challenge claims. And the thing that really shocks me at the moment is we are lurching towards a new kind of authoritarianism in media, where this kind of group of lumpen proletariat journalists basically make the decisions about what we're all meant to think. And there's an absence now, there's a disconnect between critical thinking and what's put into our papers and to our media. We really do need to test this UAP subject. And what David Grush has done and what Larry Maguire in Canada has done with the letter that he's written to his defence minister is open the argument. Let's call David Grush's bluff. Let's go to the Pentagon and let's go to the Defense Department. Let's ask Joe Biden, what's the truth of this? If it's a lie, they're all going to jail because they've lied under oath. If it's not a lie, it means this is the biggest story in human history.
That's an extraordinary piece of analysis. Of course, your countryman Julian Assange is currently in His Majesty's Belmarsh without trial for making similarly important revelations. I certainly agree with you that the media are controlling this space in curious ways. You've lit up the chat there. Many people just can't get their heads around the idea that this kind of story is on the mainstream at all or on CNN. They feel that these stories are being used as a distraction. They still want more reliable footage. They still want plain evidence. But remember, I've been in this conversation for a long time now. So like I read all the Eric von Daniken stuff and all of the Timothy Good stuff. And I've always felt that the way the architecture of our systems of governance and our understanding of reality has always precluded and prevented the incorporation of non-terrestrial life because it asks so many questions of our power structures. It blows the paradigm apart. It means that it's pointless, senseless, having geographical conflicts with other human tribes. It becomes plain necessary to accept the reality that in a sense we're one people, not with one government, with decentralized, localized, collectivized democracies that acknowledge that we need to have access to our systems of control and that to place power in the hands of one establishment elite is ridiculous. Also, above all else, it demonstrates that they've been lying. Ross, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's late at night there in the Antipodes. You've done such a fantastic performance. I didn't think you would be capable of doing live what you do so beautifully in your fantastic interview there with David Grush. Thanks for coming on and advocating for us, and thank you for your kind words as well.
Thank you, mate, and thank you for your show.
get to see you again soon, Ross. Come on again. And when I'm in Australia in February, I'd love to come and see you and do something with you.
Please do.
And once we're in the same physical space, then we can really get some chemistry rocking. I want those lean. Now I'm scared. I want those kind of moments, Ross. That's what I demand. Ross's book, In Plain Sight, is out now. We'll post a link to that in the chat. Now, there's a hell of a lot to discuss.